Hello and welcome. You're watching Middle East Now on I24 News. Here are the headlines this hour. US President Joe Biden claims Saudi Arabia is ready to normalize ties with Israel in exchange for American security guarantees. Syria yet to announce the results of a parliamentary election that only 60% of the country could participate in. And the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan. We speak to Nobel Prize nominee Mahbouba Siraj, who says the world should now engage with the Taliban. First, Hamas fired rockets towards Israel's southern city of Sderot this Tuesday. It was the first such attack since the IDF strike over the weekend, which killed the senior Hamas commander Rafah Salome and possibly its top commander Mohammed Deif. Hamas said the strike put hostage talks in jeopardy, yet they continue, including below-the-radar negotiations between Israel and Egypt. Our senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has the latest.
Morning, day and night, the near-daily protests against the government and for a ceasefire now continue throughout Israel. And in the halls of power, negotiators continue to work to reach a deal. An Israeli negotiating team will be flying out this week for ongoing talks with Egyptian, Qatari, and American mediators. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer and confirmed Israel's commitment to reaching a ceasefire deal.
Specifically, they talked about what some of the remaining sticking points are. As the president announced last week, we have reached a framework agreement, but there are still a number of issues that need to be bridged. And so the secretary talked about practical solutions that we have in mind for how to bridge those differences and get to a final agreement. They talked about plans for the day after the conflict and how to establish governance and security in Gaza.
This comes after days of uncertainty over whether or not Hamas had pulled out of the negotiations following the IDF's attempted assassination Saturday of one of Hamas's most senior commanders, Mohammed Deif, the terror group's military chief. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, 90 people were killed in the attack, and Israel still awaits confirmation of whether Deif was killed. Hamas saying he survived and that they're still engaged in the ceasefire talks.
So one of the things the secretary did when he met with Ron Dermer and the National Security Advisor Hanegbi earlier today was to express our serious concern about the recent civilian casualties in Gaza. As I've noted before, we have seen civilian casualties come down from the high points of the conflict and even from where they were, say, 6 weeks, 2 months ago, but they still remain unacceptably high.
Israel on Monday struck Gaza again in a continuous effort to dismantle and put pressure on Hamas. But many, both Israelis and Palestinians, have had enough. In democratic Israel, the public can protest on the street. In Gaza, desperate Palestinians talk to the press.
It's been 10 months. We're exhausted, we're devastated, we are extremely tired, our patience is over. Whether Hamas or Israel, they need to agree as soon as possible.
Talks are carrying on at various levels. One key issue is the question of the withdrawal of Israeli soldiers from Gaza's border with Egypt. Last Friday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he insists that Israel remain on the Philadelphia corridor. But behind closed doors, Israel and Egypt are reportedly discussing potential solutions. While this round of talks does seem to carry more optimism than previously, officials say there are still obstacles, but at the moment, they're not insurmountable.
Well, with me in the studio this hour, Shiri Fein-Grossman is a member of Forum Dvora, Women in Foreign Policy and National Security. She's also the former head of regional affairs at Israel's National Security Council. Good to see you, as always, Shiri. So we've got still no confirmation, no formal confirmation that Mohammed Deif, the senior Hamas commander, the most senior after Sinwar, is dead. No proof either that he is alive from Hamas. And yet the talks continue. What do you make of it all?
Well, I think it's a very positive sign. I think Israel is doing the right thing with pressing on with the military pressure. It is one of the biggest leverage we have. And the fact, look, Mohammed Marwan Issa also, the IDF assassinated him a couple of months ago, and still there's no confirmation by Hamas. So I think they're kind of taking the same playbook here, not confirming or denying or saying anything.
But he would have to be replaced, wouldn't he? I mean, in terms of the organizational structure.
From a strategy, this is, the IDF gave like a bounty award for each commander of the Hamas operatives, and actually the other person that was killed, he was the commander of the Khan Yunis battalion. It was actually would have received more money if you tipped him off than Muhammad Def, because from a military point of view, from actually, the forces on the ground, he was more valuable. Muhammad Def is a legend, is a mythology. He's also, masterminding things. So he's crucially important also from a morale point of view. So, one by one, and leaving Sinwar to kind of, face everything by himself, which I don't think he's very concerned about, but there are reports, as you mentioned, that there's mounting pressure from commanders in Hamas. And you have to remember a very important point, that supplies are running out for Hamas. And
because Israel has control of the
exactly, of Rafah, and also of money. I mean, in the end of the day, the Hamas organization is built on paying Hamas operatives and on salaries. And when we took Rafah out of the equation, even with the aid now came in during this war, they would receive. People are talking about billions of dollars that they took away, the 30% of every truck
for themselves.
Exactly, right. as a tax they would pay. They would take for every truck. So once they took that away, a lot of the money is kind of fading, and they don't have money to pay the operators.
And that is key, isn't it? Israel does control Rafah, and it does control the Philadelphia corridor, and it also has this Netzarim
corridor cutting
Gaza in half. Now, one of the hardline members of the Netanyahu coalition has said she will collapse the government if Israel relinquishes control. Might it have to, though, to get some hostages back? Relinquish control of that territory?
Look, the deal that the Biden administration is talking about actually didn't include what will happen to Rafah, and that's one of the great, updates and upgrades we need to that kind of deal. Long term, it's a crucial thing, and it's one of the giveaways that Israel is going to have to take. But I think there's many voices, not just in government, but security experts are saying it's the salami kind of structure of the deal, while you're getting every time a few of the hostages, and only after a certain point you'll get all the hostages back, is not a good way to use the cards we currently have. And a lot of people are saying give all the hostages right now, and then they'll get back the Rafah. So, and it is a dilemma, and I think it's not an easy dilemma to make a decision on.
There's also a lot of reporting right now about the IDF being tired and needing a break, and it was never designed for this long 9-month war. But then, there was an interview with the former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett recently, and he said, look, the IDF is only fighting at a relatively low capacity in Gaza right now.
Yeah, the intensity...
Where do you stand on that?
No. I think, I've listened to a lot of people, a lot of soldiers. The fighting spirit of the soldiers on the ground that are in Gaza right now is very, very high. The morale is very high. They're very keen on getting the hostages back. That's the one main agenda. And they give up essentially their life for it. There was a lot of casualties in recent month, I would say, weeks. And actually we've seen better results of that, with less casualties lately, and knock on wood. And I think that has an effect. No, I think they're saving strength for a possibility of a war, of escalation with Lebanon, with Hezbollah, and that seems to be further and further away, I have to say.
A war with Hezbollah?
Yeah. And that kind of frees up a little bit of energy and resources, I believe. So we're getting into a really crucial point when it comes to Gaza.
The other point of pressure on Hamas, and actually the Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, has just been speaking a few moments ago at a state ceremony for soldiers who fell in 2014. He says that the reason there is a deal underway, that there are talks underway, is because of the military pressure that Israel is putting on Hamas. But another issue, which we saw in that report, is that we're seeing more and more Gazans turning on Hamas. They're fed up, they're tired, they don't want this to go on anymore. Is that a significant point of pressure, do you think?
Not right now. I think it comes together. If we see the control of Hamas over Gaza declining more and more, that people will be a lot more, I would say, free and to object to the Hamas rule. But I mean, honestly, there is popular support for Hamas amongst, again, the vast majority of people in Gaza and the vast majority of people in the West Bank. And that's a sad, sad reality. And again, we've said this so many times in the last 9 months about the education, about UNRWA, about, structural things that have to change, the anti-Semitic kind of notion that's at the basis of the Palestinian education system. If we don't change these things, then all of this was being for nothing. And it's up, and I'm on a English channel, we have to do everything we can, for this will be the last war. And it starts with the education system, with UNRWA, with the big strategy with Saudi Arabia vis-a-vis Iran. And I know these three huge things are something that we owe it to the people who perished their lives.
Otherwise, we're just going to be back here
Exactly.
2 years' time from now, or even less. All right, Shiri, for now, thank you very much indeed. Shiri Fine-Grossman there. Well, as we were talking about the tensions in the West Bank and the mounting support for Hamas there, today a 50-year-old Palestinian woman was arrested. She pulled out a knife near troops guarding the Cave of the Patriarchs in the city of Hebron. And tensions are at a boiling point in the West Bank following a series of attacks and counter-terrorism raids by the IDF. Our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Osseran, has more.
A perilous 12 hours in the West Bank following a chain of security incidents. 3 Israelis were lightly wounded in a shooting attack near the Palestinian village of Beit Lid in the northern West Bank early Tuesday. Authorities say several gunmen standing on the side of the road opened fire at the vehicle with an Israeli license plate. Only 1 bullet hit the car, with the 3 passengers lightly injured by glass shards, as police says 53 bullet casings were found on the scene. A manhunt to locate the shooters is still underway.
We left Avnei Hefetz on the way to Mount Bracha. When we arrived at the intersection, I heard a loud boom. It turned out to be a bullet penetrating the car. I looked to the right and noticed my friend's hands were bleeding. We kept driving until we saw the IDF forces.
The incident occurred hours after Israeli forces carried out arrest raids for terror suspects across the West Bank. Clashes erupted in multiple areas between Israeli forces and Palestinian gunmen. In one incident, an Israeli border police officer was lightly wounded in a stabbing attack during an operation in the town of El Bire near Ramallah. The killed attacker, a 19-year-old Palestinian from the Gaza Strip.
During our sweeping of buildings in the Ramallah area where Israeli forces were operating, a suspect jumped me from a dark corner and began stabbing me with a knife in my upper body. While battling him, I moved to the left to open a direct line of fire, and my team, who opened fire, neutralized the terrorist.
Shortly before that, 3 Israelis were injured by IDF gunfire after being mistakenly identified as terrorists. The IDF said it was investigating the incident. A total of 4,400 terror suspects were arrested in the West Bank since the start of the war, with nearly half of them affiliated with Hamas. The terror group praised Tuesday morning's attack, calling it a natural response to Israel's, quote, crimes against Palestinians. They also called on Palestinians everywhere to continue attacking Israelis as the fighting on the other fronts continues.
All right, some very disturbing news in now. The families of the 5 young female observers who were taken by Hamas terrorists from the Nahal Oz military base on October 7th, their families have agreed to release these images. Now, these are the first images of the 5 girls, Liri, Karina, Agam, Daniela and Naama, from inside Gaza. The pictures we saw before, that horrific, shocking video that we saw, you can see she has a black eye. That's Naama Levi. That must be really hard for her family to have seen those images. And there they are in a room being held in Gaza, presumably. You can see that they've all been beaten and abused. Very shocking images, and the family have agreed today to release those images. You'll remember there was a shocking video from the moment of their capture back on October 7th at the Nahal Oz military base. Well, the families have just agreed to release these photographs of the 5 women still in their pyjamas. They were still in their pyjamas, unarmed female soldiers taken from the Nahal Oz military base. Shiri Fine-Grossman is with me. Yet another image which really pierces the heart. It's horrible to see.
Yeah, it's horrific. It's tough to see, and we know what they're going through. We don't know exactly what the condition is. One of them is actually there was a release of video for a few months ago, talking to the camera. We don't know her condition. They need to be released immediately with no conditions. I mean, you have to say that and over again. This whole game that we're in, it's horrible. And
they're young girls, they're teenagers. I mean, they are.
Look, they're soldiers. They're soldiers,
But they were observers. They were unarmed. They
were unarmed, and but that's not the issue. The issue is how are they being treated. They're supposed to give it a prisoner of war kind of standing with certain rights, visitations, amount of food, and so on and so forth. And we know they've been sexually abused. The world, denies this. We heard in the video that was released a few months ago of them being called sabra. It's a spoil of war that you can
sex slaves. You can
impregnate. And make your own. So, and then the photo of Naama is heart-wrenching and piercing and
we should be clear. This is the families of the girls who have agreed to release these photos. These are not new photos that have been released by Hamas. So presumably they've known about them. Of course, they saw them.
I hope the people in Qatar will see this and put it. Every possible pressure, and we were talking about the military pressure, but unfortunately, only in recent months and the recent Biden deal, we've really seen pressure, or at least heard about the possibility of Qatar actually expelling the Hamas leaders.
That's only relatively.
And we didn't have to wait 7 months for it to do that.
Absolutely, Shiri, for now. Thank you very much indeed. Well, Israel's main ally, the United States, is increasingly focused on its own domestic politics, given an eventful few days, to say the least. But both Republicans and Democrats are setting out their policy positions on the Middle East. In an interview, President Biden said Saudi Arabia was now ready to fully recognise Israel in exchange for American security guarantees and help to install a civilian nuclear facility. Meanwhile, the former president, Donald Trump, named his pick for vice president, the Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, who then came out and said the war in Gaza should end as quickly as possible in order to allow the Israelis and the Sunni Arab states to form a united front against Iran. Well, here to talk about all of that, we're joined by Loai Al-Sharif, peace activist and an expert in Arab-Israeli relations. Great to see you, Loai. Thank you for joining us. So we've got both parties then talking about Saudi Arabia. It is a dominant theme in the campaign, Middle East foreign policy. Who is more likely to bring about a deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia?
The Republicans. That's the short answer. I believe that after the debate between President Trump and or the former President Trump and President Biden, it's very obvious that the one who really can bring peace to the Middle East or can foster and build the Abraham Accords, even expand the Abraham Accords, would be President Trump. So I think it's too late now for even the Congress to pass a legislation that would recognize the demands that Saudi Arabia required by the United States. We're talking about now August coming, and then November, the election. So it's too short for Biden to make this historic deal. So I believe that, and I wish for Trump to become a president. Very honest and blunt in this, because I'm very selfish when it comes to the Middle East, where we see the Abraham Accords expand and flourish. Maybe at that time, Saudi Arabia would have a real peace with Israel.
All right, well, we'll talk about the Republicans in a moment, but I just want to focus on what President Biden said in that TV interview, because this is news. He says Saudi Arabia would be willing to make a deal with Israel, to recognise Israel, without insisting on a pathway to a Palestinian state. He says that they're more focused on American security guarantees and getting their own nuclear program. I mean, is that right, what Biden said?
Well, maybe I missed that part in the interview. I did not hear him say without the recognition of, or without the demand.
He didn't say without, but he didn't mention it.
Yeah, so he didn't mention it because it comes with a package. So Saudi Arabia was always insisting on having and by the way, Laura, there is a difference between a demand for a Palestinian statehood and a pathway. So a pathway, if you're demanding a pathway, that's my own analysis now, that's my personal analysis. If you're demanding for a pathway to a milestone, you would then have the courage to blame those who don't want to put some efforts for it if it doesn't succeed. So that's the difference between demanding a pathway to a Palestinian state and demanding a Palestinian state to come into being. So he didn't mention that because it comes with a package, and Saudi Arabia was insisting on having a pathway, a clear pathway to a Palestinian state. So I don't really think that would change the dynamics of the Saudi requirements from the United States for the recognition of Israel.
All right, well, let's talk about the Republican vice presidential hopeful, J.D. Vance. He, right after he was nominated, he came out and he attacked Biden for what he said was a failure to take advantage of the infrastructure set up by President Trump. He was referring to the Abraham Accords. You would agree with that, I would imagine.
I would agree with that, and it's stating the obvious. The current administration, the current U.S. administration picked up the Abraham Accords, did not build it up, picked it up, but did not build it up, did not invest enough. First, it changed its name to normalization deals, and then it reverted to the Abraham Accords, which is a great name, by the way. It's a blissful name. So, yeah, the current administration could have expanded the Abraham Accords, but in my personal assessment, it viewed it as an achievement of the Trump administration. This is why it didn't push for more expansion. So the vice president was right about that. But I always say that I appreciate what the current administration did, at least to preserve, to maintain the Abraham Accords, but not to expand it or to even foster it.
Staying with American politics, because the Emirati President bin Zayed, he was one of the first world leaders to offer his condolences to President Trump, his message of support anyway after that assassination attempt on Sunday. Has there been a lot of shock in the Gulf states about what happened?
Absolutely, great shock. President Trump has been a good friend to the Gulf states, and he described Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed in many occasions that he's one of the greatest leaders in the region, and of course he is. And so this was like a shock to be received in this format, that one of the former presidents was being assassinated on TV. Thank God it didn't go well for the assassin, of course, but it was a complete shock. And as I told you, Laura, President Trump keeps great relations with the Gulf states, and he proved that he's the good friend of so many leaders in the region.
Loay Al-Sharif, good to see you again. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura.
Well, back here in Israel, politicians from across the board have condemned an attack on 2 IDF soldiers by members of the ultra-Orthodox community. It happened during protests in the religious city of Bnei Brak. Tensions are running high as the IDF says it will be sending out draft orders to members of the religious community as early as next week. Our Nicole Zedek has the latest.
Dozens of ultra-Orthodox Jews shouting and throwing objects at 2 senior IDF officers in the religious city of Bnei Brak for a hot topic meeting, the establishment of a Haredi brigade in the army.
The recruitment orders are underway. They'll be issued during the next few weeks. So I think this is a dramatic change and should be congratulated because it will increase security and unity. These 2 things are important.
The IDF confirmed Tuesday it will start sending out initial draft orders to ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students on Sunday. Their announcement came after a petition was filed by the Movement for Quality Government in Israel, which demanded the High Court order the government and IDF immediately draft 63,000 yeshiva students who had been exempt from service, accusing the IDF of ignoring the court's rulings. The Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee chairman said he'll start working on a draft bill on Wednesday. and anyone opposed is welcome to join the discussion.
There is only one place where a conscription law is drafted, and that is in the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. They start working on the wording of the sections on Wednesday. Everyone is invited, from citizens to the Prime Minister.
The mob attack on officers has been condemned by both the opposition and coalition, with Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich chiming in.
The attack by the extremists in Bnei Brak on the IDF officers is a dangerous incident of violence and coercion that does not represent even a fraction of the ultra-Orthodox public. It is important to continue efforts to establish new frameworks adapted to the lifestyle of the ultra-Orthodox public and to increase the participation of the IDF and the civil service.
But the finance ministry also warned Tuesday of possible damages to the economy, citing a new report that found if ultra-Orthodox men are drafted, it could hurt efforts to integrate this population into the workforce. So many details still need to be ironed out if this section of the religious population is to join the army in the near future.
1 second. Time for a very short break. When we come back, we'll head to the north amid the ongoing threat from the Iranian-backed Lebanese terrorist organisation Hezbollah. More on that next. Stay with us.
I had the mahala, I did an operation, and I had 34 treatments of radiation. After the treatments, I was halash, very, very tired. I couldn't even drive a car. A friend of mine says, Moshe, please, try the Z Medicare machine. I'm gonna bring it to you. I said, I don't need it, I don't need it. After 3 days, I started driving, and I felt better. Since then, I'm always using the machine Z Medicare.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
Welcome back. And with the US election just a few months away, both parties have been laying out their policies on the Middle East, in particular with regard to Saudi Arabia and whether or not they'll be able to get Saudi Arabia to sign up to the Abraham Accords. Well, we heard from Luay Al-Sharif, our guest, just before the break. With me in the studio, Shiri Fine-Grossman is from Forum Dvora. And Shiri, you have worked on the Abraham Accords.
Yes.
We're all very hopeful that at some point during the last 4 years we may have seen Saudi Arabia sign up to the deal. Of course, it all went horribly wrong with the Hamas attacks on October 7th. But just reacting to what you heard from Luay there, do you agree with his assessment?
Well, generally, yes. I think, look, if there were the right conditions, I think there's enough time to get the deal on the table. But I don't think the conditions are yet there. So it's not likely, but definitely I think there is, and
not
there should be
before the election.
Before the election, and
very unlikely.
It's hard to see that happening with the current circumstances. The war in Gaza is not over. In Israel, it's still very much a turmoil to get what the Saudis demand from Israel and what Israel is willing to give to the Saudis. There's kind of lack of compatibility here.
Do you agree with him that a Republican president would have more chance?
Look, I think the Trump administration is bringing an experienced team that I saw firsthand how professional it is and how much they are. I would say they're very similar in that transactional way. I think they're that kind of the way they both behave, both leaders, right? Both
Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince.
Exactly, Crown Prince and Trump. They're transactional leaders. They make transactions. They do business. They don't talk about ideology and values. No, it's what I give to you, what you give me in return. And I think there's
Trump
a better...
speaks the language of the Middle East.
Exactly. So, and you see how much he's admired throughout the Middle East. And I think it's a genuine admiration. And let's not forget, he doesn't usually criticize those countries over human rights, but on sponsoring terrorism, like he did over Qatar. And I really, really hope when he comes to the office, if he comes, but I think he will be, he does a really policy shift around Qatar.
Yeah, we'll have to wait and see, won't we? Just a few months.
And Iran, of course.
Of course. Shiri, thank you very much for now. Well, tensions remain high in northern Israel, meanwhile, amid the threat from the Iranian-backed Lebanese terrorist group Hezbollah. We can go to the north now. Our correspondent, Pierre Clochendler, is standing by. Pierre, it has been, relatively speaking, a more peaceful day in the north, dare I say, but there has been an IDF drone strike in the south of Lebanon, I understand.
Right, there was a 19-and-a-half-hour lull since last rocket attacks on Kiryat Shmona with 20 rockets yesterday overnight. And starting at 7 at the end of the Shiite festival, the Ashura festival, there were 4 successive rocket attacks. Many fell in open fields, provoking fire. We know of 2 impacts in and around Kiryat Shmona, but no reports of victims up until now. There were 9 interceptions that I counted in the sky. And now Lebanese media is reporting that facing Zarit in the central upper Galilee, facing South Lebanon, there was a drone attack on in a village called Imatut, where there are supposedly victims in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon. And earlier on, at around 3 or 4 p.m., there was a drone attack on a motorcycle which killed 2 Lebanese, or maybe 1 Lebanese and 1 Syrian citizen. Probably Hezbollah operatives, according to the IDF. And now, after the Ashura Shiite festival ended, rockets have started again over the city of Kiryat Shmona.
Yeah, thank you very much, Pierre Clochendler, there in the north of Israel. Shiri Fine-Grossman's with me in the studio. Do you think when it comes to the north, we've moved back into this tit-for-tat stage, an assassination here, a few rockets there? Because a few weeks ago, we had seemed to reach a real escalation and everyone was worried that war was imminent.
Yeah, I think there was a moment in time a few weeks ago where I was kind of thinking that the dynamics is going into that direction with some serious, targeted killing that Israel, the IDF, performed on Hezbollah commanders, very senior commanders. And I think in a way that if we pass that and we didn't see a major escalation, that it leads me to think that we might not reach that escalation anytime soon. And there is a chance here that Hezbollah is deterred to step into a kind of a wider escalation. What are we seeing in the last few days is kind of this targeted killing of Syrian civilians with ties to Hezbollah, and the financial kind of system that supports.
You're talking about the Syrian businessman. Who
exactly,
was
and today we're also a targeted killing of allegedly both Syrian individuals as well. So there might be kind of this, let's say, a new strategy or kind of series of attacks on really what sustains this relationship between Hezbollah and Assad, and that's more of a strategic kind of a maybe course of action that Israel is taking, which is interesting, and we should definitely follow on that.
Okay, Shiri, for now, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Syria is yet to announce election results after holding a vote that's unlikely to yield any surprises. The largely symbolic parliamentary vote applies to the 60% of the country still under Assad's control. More in this report.
In a country torn by over a decade of civil war, Syrians are voting for a new parliament. But many, both within and outside the country, are questioning the legitimacy of these elections. The millions of Syrian diaspora displaced by the conflict are not eligible to vote, and rebel-held regions in the northwest and Kurdish-controlled northeast are excluded from the polling. And in government-held areas, Western countries and Assad's critics say the polling is neither free nor fair. This year, 1,516 candidates are competing for 250 seats in the People's Assembly. Previous elections have seen delays and accusations of fraud, with Assad's Ba'ath Party and its allies securing a majority of the seats. This year, experts expect similar outcomes. The elections are taking place amid a severe economic crisis, with the Syrian pound plummeting to record lows and inflation skyrocketing. The country is grappling with the aftermath of conflict, sanctions, and the COVID-19 pandemic.
We are always hopeful that in each case, good will come to this country, that there will be tangible steps to have real improvements for the economic and living conditions of Syrian citizens.
I hope to see the candidates meet our expectations. I mean to work for this country and citizens, to improve the situation and not to be like their predecessors.
In areas under government control, the real competition ended long before ballots were cast. The Ba'ath Party's dominance means any opposition is merely token. While the facade of democracy continues, the reality on the ground tells of a tightly controlled regime ensuring its survival. With Assad facing term limits ending his presidency in 2028, many expect the next parliament to push for a constitutional amendment to extend his rule.
There's been a rare terrorist attack in Oman. 4 Pakistani nationals were killed and dozens injured when a gunman opened fire at a Shia mosque. Shiites have been observing the month of Ashura, an event which has historically stirred up sectarian tensions. Let's go to Dubai. We're joined by our correspondent, Bastien Bourrier. Bastien, very few details from the authorities in Oman. Do we know any more about what happened exactly?
We know that the event took place late last night around 2 in the morning when several gunmen opened fire on a crowd of Muslim worshippers outside, as you said, a Shiite mosque. The Imam Ali Mosque near the capital city, Muscat. Most of the people in the area at the time were of Pakistani origin. As you said, the 4 dead were actually Pakistanis, as were the 30 wounded, which, as you can imagine, prompted an immediate reaction from the Pakistani authorities who strongly, of course, condemned the attack.
Any ideas as to who may have been behind this?
Well, the mosque targeted by this murderous attack today is a Shiite mosque. Now, was it the work of Sunni activists? It's too early to say. The authorities say they are continuing to gather evidence and conduct investigation at this point in time. And all day, a security perimeter around the scene of the shooting prevented journalists from approaching, with several embassies as well, the US Embassy, the French Embassy, issuing security alerts and cancelling all visa appointments until further notice.
Now, Oman has a reputation, doesn't it, as something of a haven of stability in the region. Is this a sign that that is not necessarily the case anymore?
If we look at the context, the worldwide Shiite community, or at least the community of practicing Shiites, is currently celebrating Ashura, which is probably the most important of their religious events. To put it briefly, it's the annual commemoration of the death of Imam Hussein, who is the historical figure of Shiism on the worldwide scale. And in other Arab countries, and for a long time now, Ashura is sometimes marred by violence. This has often been the case in Iraq, for instance, which is one of the few Arab countries where Shiites and Sunnis each represent an almost equal proportion of the population, almost 50-50. Hence the recurring tensions, which were notably exacerbated by the American invasion of Iraq. Oman, on the other hand, is a country with a Muslim majority, but where the dominant community is that of the Ibadites, who make up around 60% of the population and have a different interpretation of Islam. But there are also 30% Sunnis and 5% Shiites. And it is the first time in its contemporary history that Oman has suffered a terrorist attack. It is a country that has always refused to take part in conflicts in the Middle East, at least militarily, only acting as a mediator or a facilitator in Yemen or between Iran and the US on nuclear diplomacy, for instance. Freedom of religion was enshrined very early on in the constitution, and so on and so forth, which had made it possible to avoid these tensions until now.
Bastien, thank you very much indeed. Bastien Bourri there in Dubai. Now, girls are barred from getting a high school education. Women have been almost completely removed from the professional sphere, and neither women nor girls are allowed to go just to enjoy a public park. These are just some of the draconian measures that have been imposed on women and girls in Afghanistan since the Taliban returned to power. My next guest refused to leave the country even when she had the chance, and she stayed on to fight for the rights of women and girls. Mahbouba Siraj, welcome, and thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
So tell us...
I'm really honored to be here.
It is our honor. Thank you very much. And so tell me, since the Taliban takeover in your country, what is life like on a daily basis for women and girls, and how has it changed over the past 3 years?
Thank you very much for having me in your show. Life has been extremely difficult for the women and girls of this country since the Taliban takeover. It's been horrendous. Girls can't go to school, girls cannot walk around freely, girls cannot go to places they want to without a mahram, girls cannot travel alone without a mahram. I mean, going even to the doctors are difficult. They cannot go the way, anybody and everybody that is a free person can and should be able to do that. They are not able to do all of that. So there's restrictions and restrictions and restrictions and restrictions all over.
Yeah, they seem to increase all the time. And you're there, you're fighting for their rights. And you have an interesting position, because you argue that the international community should recognize the Taliban. So the counter argument is that it would legitimize them, and then there would be no leverage over them to get them to stop repressing women and girls. Can you explain why you think the world should engage now?
I'm one of those believers that I do believe instead of fighting, killing, destroying, and all of that, let's sit down at the two sides of the table and let's talk. That is the only thing I've always wanted, and that is still something I still do. Because otherwise, the choices that we have we don't have very good choices. Just take a look at the Middle East the way it is. I mean, for God's sakes, a country like Oman. I mean, what did Oman have to do for a mosque for it to be people to die and a lot of people to be injured? Oman was not that type of a country. Oman does not want to get involved in these things. But the Middle East is like that. The Middle East has become like that. And that's what the world wants Middle East to be. And us, the people that we are from Middle East, we are not smart enough to see and know how to change this for our benefit and be able to live with the world. So that's why I still do believe we should sit down and talk. That is all.
Okay.
I'm not talking about anything else, really.
Well, you do talk to them. We've seen videos of you very bravely talking to Taliban clerics and pleading with them to let girls go to school. Given what you know of them, do you think anything would get them to change their ways and see girls, as human beings and let them live and let them be free and let them get an education and fulfill their potential?
Well, I'm really actually hoping for that, because otherwise, what's my choice? I really don't have any other choice, truly. Well, that's how we're supposed to do. And the way I look at the international community and the way we are being treated, I mean, just take a look at the Doha. The Doha meeting took place. We were not even there. For God's sakes, it's been 3 years I'm here in this country and I'm working directly with the women of Afghanistan. Whether anybody recognizes me officially or not, that's besides the point. But I am here. And I'm working.
You're talking about
and I'm
the
raising
meeting
my voice. Do you think anybody asked my opinion the whole time? Do you think once? No. So what is it? What kind of a game are we playing, for God's sakes? This is what I don't understand.
So you think if the Americans, the Europeans, everyone accepted the Taliban and talked to them, they might be able to get them to improve conditions for women and girls in Afghanistan?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the question.
You think that if the Americans, the Europeans, the world, the Western world recognize the Taliban want that because they want funds to be unfrozen. You think that the world could persuade them to give women better lives?
No, but at least right now, with their recognition, if we do play our games right and know what we are doing in the world of diplomacy, maybe we can get something for the girls of Afghanistan before coming up with some kind of an agreement. That is the whole name of the game. There was a huge thing called the diplomacy of the world. International diplomacy was a big thing in the world, and that's how situations got settled. What happened to that? Nobody knows it anymore, or everybody decided not to have anything to do with it. That's one way for us to get together with the Taliban and make sure that the women of Afghanistan have some of those rights. When you want to give them recognition, get something back. And you can only do that if you sit at the table and talk. You cannot do that by destroying each other.
Tell me a bit about Afghanistan, because this isn't necessarily Afghan culture and Afghan history, is it? This has not always been a country that has this very extreme interpretation of Islam. It hasn't always been a country that oppresses and represses women and girls.
No.
Why has the country lost touch with its true roots, do you think?
Well, because that's exactly what the world wanted it. Look at who created the Taliban. I mean, for God's sakes, I mean, this is history. I'm not stupid, neither is anybody else. And these things are going to be written one day. I mean, the Taliban, who created the Taliban? Where were the Taliban all of this time? Where were they? In my neighboring country, in Pakistan. That's where they lived. And when I talked to one of the generals, the U.S. generals here in Afghanistan at one point, and I said, "Sir, you're having the war on the wrong side of the border." The man was ready to kill me. I swear to you. So what?
And Pakistan, of course, has been deporting civilians, some of whom have lived in Pakistan for decades, sending them back into Afghanistan.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's what they do. They've always done that. Pakistan is not a friend of Afghanistan, and I say that outright. I'm not, this is not something that's hidden, or it's not something that nobody knows. They are not a friend of ours. They really are not. They have never been and they never will be. So, look at what they're doing to all of our people. For God's sakes, in every single place, in every single step, when the women and the people and the men, women, young, old, everybody from Afghanistan, they want to put a step forward somewhere, there's somebody or something huge stopping them, and under the name of this and that and God knows what else. Like, we have a right to live on this earth, or we are completely persona non grata from the earth also. What is it? I don't understand it. Well, this is not right. So that's what I'm raising my voice and saying, that the world should really hear this. It's enough for the world to play the game of the game of we are being dumb and we are being deaf and we are being stupid. No more. Nobody's dumb, nobody's deaf, nobody's stupid.
Mahbouba Seraj, thank you very much indeed. We wish you all the best with your work and with your struggle for women and girls in Afghanistan. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, the north of Israel, with its farms, forests and historical sites, is usually a big draw for the tourists. But since October 7th, it has been largely deserted, except for those who refuse to abandon their homes and businesses amid the threat from Hezbollah. More in this report.
This place is usually bustling. Normally at this time of day, people are already waiting in line to get a plate of cheese. Unfortunately, it's all on hold now.
We've been closed since Saturday, October 7th. We were supposed to open the site on Sunday as usual, with many orders, but everything was cancelled. Since then, as you can see, the place is closed.
When the clock hits 4 p.m., there's not a single person in this area. Unbelievable. Not a single person.
Compared to last year, there's maybe 5% to 10% of visitors and work.
What's absurd is that we don't know what the future holds. Where are we going from here?
In the last 9 months, the north has become a ghost area. 53% of the residents have evacuated, and many businesses are empty.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Let me show you around, shall we? So, from here, you can see the entire Upper Galilee. There's a really beautiful view from here. That is Marun al-Ras, a relatively large village from which much of the shooting originates.
This is Lebanon.
Yes, we can see Lebanon. They can see us too, by the way. As a result of rocket falls, an entire vineyard of ours, 30 dunams, burned down. It was a 2010 plantation, meaning 14 years of hard work and investment that all went to waste.
A big part of the problem is the uncertainty. We don't know what will happen tomorrow. It starts with the business as a business, and it trickles down to the employees, who are all on unpaid leave, which has already ended. There are no jobs opening in the area. There's nothing. You need to have a certain level of income and show a certain level of damage. And even then, the payment for the damages, which are very heavy, doesn't cover anything, basically.
The average Israeli resident doesn't know exactly where the Golan is located, where the Galilee is located, where anti-tank missiles are fired, where they are not. So basically, they're afraid and they don't come. The current situation, certainly throughout the north, is that the local authorities, the state, are not providing the services they are supposed to provide in these places. Certainly not security, but also other things. It makes it impossible to run a business, to manage your everyday life. I don't see a situation where I abandon this area. No way. Our vineyards are here, they are planted here and in the Galilee, along the borders. I wish our country looked at things differently. Other countries are very helpful and supportive. We don't live in such a country, unfortunately. Yes, this is the situation, and we need to deal with it.
These gloomy images of abandoned spaces raise the question, what does the future hold for tourism in Israel?
We haven't stopped coming to work and supporting our workers. We have planted a vineyard this year too. We are looking forward, but at some point it starts to affect us. How positive can we be?
If I could export the boats to the Yarkon River or something, I would do it. But in reality, I can't do much. I can either run the business and lose money or close down like I did. We have no choice. That's the situation.
That brings us to the end of the show. Many thanks for watching. Do stay with us on I24 News. Vanessa Levine is up next with tonight's rundown. Good night.
I was diagnosed with asthma and I couldn't breathe at all. This shortness of breath was very difficult for me. I was even hospitalized. I used a lot of inhalers and inhalations and I didn't sleep during the night. I didn't attend sport classes and when I did, I needed to use an inhaler after. Ever since my grandmother bought me the Z-Medic device, I am more active. I even got accepted to the team and I no longer wake my parents up or depended on anything. I no longer take medication and I feel like every other kid.
A new voice is about to be heard.
אתם צופים בערוץ החדשות I24 News.
I24 News launches its fourth channel in Hebrew, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
ותיעדו את הטבח.
I24 News in Hebrew brings its international success for the past 10 years to Israel. Real-time news, sharp analyses, and passionate debates on the burning issues shaping Israeli society and the entire Middle East. And for you, English-speaking viewers, I24 News offers a unique, immersive experience. Every day until 11 a.m. EST, Hebrew programs will be broadcast live with English subtitles. And from 11 a.m. EST, back to your favorite shows in English. More than ever, the heart of a new Middle East beats on I-24 News.
On today's program, take a look at these images. 5 Israeli families plead for a deal to be secured so their daughters held captive in Gaza for more than 9 months can come back home. And an Israeli delegation is set to go to Qatar for ceasefire hostage talks. We bring you the latest. Military pressure continues in Gaza. The IDF strikes terrorists operating at yet another UNRWA school, premises that are supposed to be used for teaching by the UN Relief and Works Agency. And the Air Force strikes in Khan Yunis. And a call for unity. We go live to Wisconsin for the latest updates from the Republican National Convention after Donald Trump announces his vice presidential pick. And we ask, what could this all mean for the U.S. policy on Israel? This is the rundown on I-24 News. I'm Benita Levine. Bring our children home now. An impassioned, urgent appeal for a deal to secure the release of the Israeli hostages still held in Gaza. The families of 5 Israeli soldiers held captive by terrorists for 284 days have just released images of their daughters from their first days in captivity. The images show Liri Elbag, Karina Ariev, Agam Berger, Daniela Gilboa and Naama Levy, all held in a home in Gaza, dressed in clothing that doesn't belong to them, in a home in Gaza. Now, some of the women are visibly injured. They were all brutally abducted on the 7th of October from their base at Nahal Oz, where they served as surveillance observers. The pictures were retrieved by IDF troops in Gaza. Now, the dramatic appeal coming ahead of Benjamin Netanyahu's trip to the US to speak before Congress. Meanwhile, an Israeli delegation is said to be flying out to Qatar soon for ceasefire hostage talks yet again, as reports emerge about secret talks between Egypt and Israel on key issues. Senior correspondent Bianca Zanini has more in this report.
Morning, day and night, the near-daily protests against the government and for a ceasefire now continue throughout Israel. And in the halls of power, negotiators continue to work to reach a deal. An Israeli negotiating team will be flying out this week for ongoing talks with Egyptian, Qatari, and American mediators. On Monday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with Israeli National Security Advisor Tzachi Hanegbi and Israel's Minister of Strategic Affairs Ron Dermer, and confirmed Israel's commitment to reaching a ceasefire deal.
Specifically, they talked about what some of the remaining sticking points are. As the president announced last week, we have reached a framework agreement, but there are still a number of issues that need to be bridged. And so the secretary talked about practical solutions that we have in mind for how to bridge those differences and get to a final agreement. They talked about plans for the day after the conflict and how to establish governance and security in Gaza.
This comes after days of uncertainty over whether or not Hamas had pulled out of the negotiations following the IDF's attempted assassination Saturday of one of Hamas's most senior commanders, Mohammed Deif, the terror group's military chief. According to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry, 90 people were killed in the attack, and Israel still awaits confirmation of whether Deif was killed. Hamas saying he survived and that they're still engaged in the ceasefire talks.
So one of the things the Secretary did when he met with Ron Dermer and the National Security Advisor Hanegbi earlier today was to express our serious concern about the recent civilian casualties in Gaza. As I've noted before, we have seen civilian casualties come down from the high points of the conflict and even from where they were, say, 6 weeks, 2 months ago, but they still remain unacceptably high.
Israel on Monday struck Gaza again in a continuous effort to dismantle and put pressure on Hamas. But many, both Israelis and Palestinians, have had enough. In democratic Israel, the public can protest on the street. In Gaza, desperate Palestinians talk to the press.
It's been 10 months. We're exhausted, we're devastated, we are extremely tired, our patience is over. Whether Hamas or Israel, they need to agree as soon as possible.
Talks are carrying on at various levels. One key issue is the question of the withdrawal of Israeli soldiers from Gaza's border with Egypt. Last Friday, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said he insists that Israel remain on the Philadelphia corridor. But behind closed doors, Israel and Egypt are reportedly discussing potential solutions. While this round of talks does seem to carry more optimism than previously, officials say there are still obstacles, but at the moment, they're not insurmountable.
So for more, it's a pleasure to welcome to studio Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangat, former military secretary to 3 Israeli defense ministers and the former coordinator of government activities in the Palestinian territories in the IDF, and our Middle East correspondent, Ariel Oseren. Gentlemen, thank you both so much on the go on the security front. Eitan, I want to start with you. Devastating to take a look at the photographs of 5 young Israeli soldiers held captive for more than 9 months now. The picture on our screen right now, released just a short while ago. As we look at these images of these young women who were protecting the whole nation on the 7th of October, how do you respond?
First of all, emotionally, I think it's a very depth of sorriness and tragedy when we are looking at those, they are children, those females who were in their duty. Secondly, I think it emphasizes one very clear fact. We are now in a junction, which is a junction for the last opportunity in these circumstances, whether you have few advantage from the military activities, achievements, while you are fighting against the timetable to reach life of certain people that are alive now that we don't know yet how many and how many are not alive anymore. I think in this place, while you are calculating the achievements of the IDF, the circumstances, and above all, the results of these movies, it is our duty to bring those girls, those soldiers, those civilians who were under a big tragedy and mistake. This is the main stone that brings us to be such a country, nation, and also for the future, for our generation, to let them know that the life of them are the most important thing. So it is clear to me as a military that by returning them, we will pay in some achievements that we help to cover in the future. But in such circumstances, at the end, you have to make as a prime minister, this is prime minister decision, whether you think we exploit and use the circumstances of achieving more, pushing Hamas and making such a great, it's not a deal, it's something we own to our civilians, to bring them back home and to build another scenario of security. It is not Philadelphia, it is not undercut the north part of Gaza. It thinks that the IDF would have to work with them and to develop another kind of a concept in order to continue to beat Hamas. It is not something for a week, for a month, it is something for years, and this is the most important moment that we have to bring them, to save them, and to show our nation what is Israel's duty towards an army, towards its civilian.
More than 9 months in captivity. Those pictures we're looking at on our screen were taken in the early days of this war. So for more, stay with us, gentlemen. We're going to now check in with our correspondent, Zach Anders. He joins us now from Tel Aviv. And Zach, we're talking here in studio about these heartbreaking images, looking at these pictures of these 5 young women from the early days of captivity. All these months later, the families of these young soldiers are demanding an immediate meeting with the Prime Minister. How likely is it that will in fact happen?
Yeah, you see those pictures, you know it's been more than 280 days. You know those bruises have healed by now, but you question what new wounds do they have still in captivity. We hear from the family today. All of the family of those 4 daughters have been telling the public that they will not be pushing or not endorsing any of the Prime Minister's actions until a deal is done. They do not want him to leave for Washington and to go address Congress without a deal signed. I'll read to you what Naama Levy's mother just a moment ago said that, quote, the Prime Minister asked me to join him on his flight to the U.S. for his trip to Congress. And I explained that I cannot and will not feel comfortable joining him until I see that the negotiation regarding my Naama's release are completed. Until then, I'm staying here in Israel and continuing to fight to save my Naama. As the deal progresses and Naama and all other hostages are saved, I could come and join even with her in this delegation. There's a lot of pressure that you hear tonight from the families being very specific about what they want to see happen. There's also some talk within the room of how they do feel closed out of what's happening in Doha. They feel like the pressure that's being applied from the hostage families perhaps not being received by the Netanyahu government right now, as they are, again, looking at another deal, looking at more options, but the families here saying it's not enough, get a deal signed now, today.
Heartbreaking, and one can only just imagine the pain of these families. And again, looking at those 5 pictures, we wait to hear some kind of good news, hopefully some kind of breakthrough, and all the hostages get to come back home. Zach Anders, our correspondent in Tel Aviv, thank you so much for that update. And now for more, here in studio, still with us, Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran. We know that there are efforts towards some kind of ceasefire deal, a hostage deal that would get all the hostages, including those 5 young soldiers, back home. At the same time, reports of some kind of secret discussions between Israel and Egypt. What is known on that front?
Right, so we're looking at the main talks have been taking place also in Doha, but also in Cairo. But we see that talks in Cairo have slightly branched off and have begun to include also specific pinpoint talks on the future of the Philadelphia corridor. That's the 14-mile long border basically between the Gaza Strip and Egypt, the Sinai Peninsula. The IDF has full control over that. It gained control at the end of last month, and it described that corridor as the oxygen line of Hamas, through which it smuggled in weapons, funds, materials, and whatnot. And the IDF has so far uncovered at least 25 of those tunnels that cross the border, but saying that it will take many more months to do so. And with Prime Minister Netanyahu presenting Israel's control over the Philadelphia corridor as basically as a current obstacle to the talks, because all the negotiators are saying that they're awaiting Israel's formal response. And what's keeping Israel's formal response, among other things, is the fate of the Philadelphia corridor, where IDF Chief of Staff Herzi Halevi said the IDF will be able to secure Israel's interests with international participation without Israeli boots on the ground. And so these talks in Cairo are regarding the future of this Philadelphia corridor. At the same time, we see that this issue has become a sticking point, preventing Israel, not only preventing Israel from presenting its formal response. Everyone's awaiting Israel's response. That's the current status, at least according to the mediators. But it's also presented a public spat between the head of the army, the head of the government, and at such a sensitive time like this, where the families are trying to use these images. Also, they released the video of their kidnapping a few weeks back, trying to pressure the government into finally making that decision. The Israeli public also finds itself viewing this public spat, which I don't think really helps confidence or sense of unity moving forward.
And Eitan, your thoughts on this sensitive juncture that Ariel is outlining here?
Yeah, I would like just to add to what Ariel mentioned, that besides the Philadelphia, concerning Philadelphia, it's a big hole. It was a big fallen, what was developed there after the first time the Egyptians raid Milli steps. But we are now trying to save 120 people's life, and we are in a race against the clock time. And besides, I think it's very important meetings with Egypt, which is functioning in a main role as a strategic, important country in our region and especially in the border. What does it mean? I think there are few other points that should discuss between Israel and Egypt. It was mentioned the Philadelphia, Rafah crossing, it's the second issue. The third is the connection that divide Gaza on from the north, from the east to the west, all the north area. It means from former Carney crossing to the middle, to the sea, and that is how to control there and to make some sensors. One of the important things, and that Israel should not give up, it's the function, how Israel IDF going to deploy and outside of the international border in order to create a strip to defend the civilian that will come back. This is Egypt. On the other side, you have Qatar, which is fulfilling another important task with Hamas under United States pressure. And just last but not least remark, United States is shortening the time towards the election. And it should come to achievements. If not, we will miss a chance, and to wait to February after the new president will come to his place who will be voted, it will take a long time.
Very briefly, because I want to get to the latest developments in Gaza, Ariel.
Yeah, just two important voices. Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant saying that there is a narrowing window of opportunity, and this is the closest we've gotten. And also Herzi Halevi, IDF Chief of Staff, saying that Israel and the IDF has a moral obligation to bring the hostages back now, even at the expense of potential immediate military gains.
The military pressure continues, though, Eitan, and we know the IDF struck terrorists operating in a school, another UNRWA school. That pressure clearly is going to continue.
It's going to continue, and it will take a long time. This is the change of the concept from really IDF general attack to what we were moving now to the second or the third stage. It means ambush, attacking, entering to places a little bit like in the West Bank in order to keep and to prevent anyone to return, grow up. Assess what was done by the IDF, that half of the power of Hamas has been destroyed completely. The second half is coming to be like guerrilla organization, and this is the other junction which will show us what will be the situation in the coming weeks in the north.
There's another front as well that we need to take a look at, because the IDF says 3 Israelis were likely wounded in a shooting attack while they were driving in the northern West Bank near the Shavei Shomron settlement. Israeli forces blocked all the entrances to the nearby Palestinian village of Ramin, launching a manhunt earlier in the day. The attack was the latest in a chain of security incidents in the West Bank, where tensions remain high. Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran has more in this report.
A perilous 12 hours in the West Bank following a chain of security incidents. 3 Israelis were lightly wounded in a shooting attack near the Palestinian village of Beit Lid in the northern West Bank early Tuesday. Authorities say several gunmen standing on the side of the road opened fire at the vehicle with an Israeli license plate. Only 1 bullet hit the car, with the 3 passengers lightly injured by glass shards, as police says 53 bullet casings were found on the scene. A manhunt to locate the shooters is still underway.
We left Avnei Hefetz on the way to Mount Bracha. When we arrived at the intersection, I heard a loud boom. It turned out to be a bullet penetrating the car. I looked to the right and noticed my friend's hands were bleeding. We kept driving until we saw the IDF forces.
The incident occurred hours after Israeli forces carried out arrest raids for terror suspects across the West Bank. Clashes erupted in multiple areas between Israeli forces and Palestinian gunmen. In one incident, an Israeli border police officer was lightly wounded in a stabbing attack during an operation in the town of El Bire near Ramallah. The killed attacker, a 19-year-old Palestinian from the Gaza Strip.
During our sweeping of buildings in the Ramallah area where Israeli forces were operating, a suspect jumped me from a dark corner and began stabbing me with a knife in my upper body. While battling him, I moved to the left to open a direct line of fire, and my team, who opened fire, neutralized the terrorist.
Shortly before that, 3 Israelis were injured by IDF gunfire after being mistakenly identified as terrorists. The IDF said it was investigating the incident. A total of 4,400 terror suspects were arrested in the West Bank since the start of the war, with nearly half of them affiliated with Hamas. The terror group praised Tuesday morning's attack, calling it a natural response to Israel's, quote, crimes against Palestinians. They also called on Palestinians everywhere to continue attacking Israelis as the fighting on the other fronts continues.
Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Jangat, these incidents, so-called, in the West Bank are happening with increasing regularity. Who is in control to quell the tensions as we speak?
The West Bank, I think, should not be increasing its scenarios of increasing escalations, because that can change all the area, the circle war that we are facing with, especially under the 2 arenas of Gaza and the north. There is a lot of activities sponsoring, pushing by Iran, Hezbollah and Hamas in order to create from the West Bank an explosion that will have impact inside Israel, like what happened a few days ago in the terror attack near Tzrifin, while 4 soldiers has been wounded. They are trying to bring a lot of money, a lot of arms that are smuggling from Jordan. By the way, the eastern area, the border with Jordan, in my opinion, will fulfill a great task and goal in order to prevent it in the future, because this is the lack of the Iranian plan in order to complete surround of Israel. So it's going also to bring the Palestinian authorities entity in this situation. What happened today, it's a sign. Basically, I may say that the IDF, under contain the situation all around the West Bank, are using a concept on attacking inside those kind of terror, of cabins of terror. But the last but is the fact that Israel government should calculate again its economical sanctions against the population in the West Bank, because this brings much more people, many people to the streets.
Yet another front that certainly raises a lot of concerns as we speak. Gentlemen, stay with us, because we now go to the north, talking about worrying fronts. Correspondent Pierre Kloschendler joins us from northern Israel. And Pierre, yet another rocket barrage launched from southern Lebanon towards northern Israel just a short while ago. What can you tell us? What is the latest there?
Right, there were 6 rocket barrages in less than an hour up until 20 minutes ago, with tens of rockets falling around or being intercepted over the city of Kiryat Shmona. There is some damage, no casualties, only damage either by rocket impacts or by interceptions. There were many interceptions, and you can see behind me what happened next to an Iron Dome position, which is intercepting those rockets. You can see that there was also an impact, and there is, you can maybe distinguish the fire near the Iron Dome position, which is the result of an impact near that position. Yet, it's not over. The Ashura festival ended at 7 and the rocket barrages started, the Ashura Shiite festival. And since then, there's been also an airstrike, according to Lebanese reports, in the village of Imatut, which is facing Zarit in the central sector of the Israel-Lebanese border, in which, according to Lebanese report, 3 children, Syrian children, were killed in an open field. They were working in agriculture. There are many Syrian refugees in Lebanon. And if this report is true, then there will be probably more rocket barrages on the Israeli territory facing Lebanon. Now, there was a drone strike at around 4 p.m., about 4.5 hours ago, on a motorcycle near the village of Tibnit in the Nabatea area, which is southeastern Lebanon, in which 2 Hezbollah operatives, according to the IDF, were eliminated. So the rocket barrages was in reaction, according to Hezbollah, to that elimination near Nabatea, and now we are waiting to see if Hezbollah will react to those Lebanese reports in which 3 Syrian children were killed.
Certainly, we will be waiting to see how it all develops across the northern front. Correspondent Pierre Kloschendler, live from northern Israel. Thank you as always for that update. And still in studio, Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot. We don't have much time. Your take on what could unfold in the coming hours across that northern front, very briefly.
I think that still now, and it will be in the coming even individual days, we will face the same situation while Israel is attacking and estimate the situation with heads of the Hezbollah. On the other end, Hezbollah will continue with rockets and UAVs, but still both sides are careful not to escalate the situation. They are looking to the south.
Major General in the Reserves, Eitan Dangot, thank you so much as always for being here in studio. Ariel Osran, you're going to stay with us right now, though. We are taking a very short break. Back in a bit on The Rundown.
My asthma is being very bad, and then before the Z medic machine, I had to use the nebulizer a lot, and I wasn't able to run as much. I wasn't able to swim and go in the water for as long.
We've been struggling since he's a newborn with asthma, with the nebulizer and the steroids, the Prelone, the prednisone, sometimes hospitalization. Z medic machine is very highly recommended. If this could keep us off steroids, it's an unbelievable machine, this Z medic machine.
This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com. This broadcast is brought to you by Israel Bonds, the most direct and impactful way to support Israel. Invest now at israelbonds.com.
The latest out of the United States now, after former President Donald Trump announced his running mate for vice president just ahead of his appearance at the Republican National Convention. The 39-year-old right-wing hardliner J.D. Vance aligns with Trump on many issues, including on foreign policy when it comes to Israel. More in this report by our Emma Siegel.
Senator J.D. Vance has the overwhelming support of this convention to be the next Vice President of the United States.
Only a few days after an assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump, he announced his running mate for Vice President on his platform Truth Social on the first day of the Republican National Convention. He was at the RNC a short time later with a bandaged ear and Vance by his side. Vance, who once called Trump America's Hitler, has become an ally to the former president in recent years and ultimately won Trump's endorsement in the 2022 Ohio Senate race. While the 39-year-old Vance would be the youngest vice president in American history if elected, he has made a name for himself in just a few short years, particularly for his 2016 memoir, Hillbilly Elegy. He has trailblazed his path as a hardliner right-wing Republican and a staunch supporter of Israel. Vance's foreign policy stance was tested by the Biden administration with a funding package for Israel coupled with aid to Ukraine, a package that was delayed for months by Vance and 14 other Republicans who voted against the inclusion of aid to Ukraine.
The United States Senate would pass aid, much needed aid to Israel today. At this very moment, aid the House has already passed. It could go to the president's signature this afternoon if my Democratic colleagues would stand down, but they won't. Many of them here are gathered to push back against our very common sense proposal to offer support to one of our most important allies as they face an existential threat.
The young senator also criticized President Biden's approach to Israel's conduct in the current war with Hamas, saying that the U.S. should not be dictating how Israel fights against the terrorist groups in the Gaza Strip. When a reporter asked Biden about Vance as the vice president nominee, the president seemingly brushed the question aside.
I'm quoting Trump on the issue, so I don't see any difference.
So for more, we now go live to Wisconsin. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim joins us from Milwaukee. Mike, a clear message of unity so far out of the Republican convention following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And of course, the VP pick announced overnight. The Republican Jewish coalition is happy, saying J.D. Vance will always stand with the Jewish community. Tell us more. What is happening there now?
Well, that's what the Republican Jewish coalition is saying. On the Democratic side, they're not so happy about the pick based on some of Vance's rhetoric, since he kind of changed his philosophy and became a Trump acolyte. He's got a mixed bag record on anti-Semitism specifically. Vance has gone after the pro-Hamas supporters that have permeated college campuses throughout America. He's used some very harsh language in terms of his feelings toward them, in terms of where they should head, which is out of the country, if they're not grateful to be here to begin with, especially those on a foreign visa. However, he's taken to the podium in several places to take up for the likes of Nick Fuentes, a Holocaust denier and an avowed anti-Semite who has a popular platform here in America. He's taken up for Marjorie Taylor Greene, a fellow Congress member who's made a number of anti-Semitic statements in the past. So really, it kind of depends on Vance's political viewpoints, it would seem, on exactly where he stands. We spoke earlier today with Mike Lawler, a New York area Congress member who has been a staunch pro-Israel voice, a staunch voice against anti-Semitism within the halls of Congress, to get his opinions on the vice presidential selection. Here's Mike Lawler.
I have complete confidence that our ticket will continue to be a staunch defender of the state of Israel and fight back against anti-Semitism. My bill, the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act, was a codification into law of President Trump's executive order from 2019 requiring the Department of Education to adopt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism and all of its contemporary examples. President Trump is the one who fulfilled the longstanding promise to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. And we will continue to stand by our ally, Israel. And I'm looking forward to welcoming Prime Minister Netanyahu to Washington next week.
And talking of that visit to Washington by Benjamin Netanyahu, the family of American-Israeli hostage Omer Neutra expected to address the Republican convention on Wednesday, urging more action over the 8 American citizens still held captive by Hamas terrorists since the 7th of October. What's expected there?
Yeah, Republicans seem like they're confident they can make this a winning issue. The divide on Israel and the Democratic administration and what they feel has been a weak response to the anti-Semitic protests that have gone on across America and the Democratic administration's response to it. So we'll not only hear from the Neutra family here tomorrow, later on tonight, we'll hear from the CEO of the Republican Jewish Coalition, Matt Brooks, Lee Zeldin, a former Congress member and gubernatorial candidate from New York, a Jewish leader in the area, will also speak here at the convention. And landing in just a few hours and with a speaking role tomorrow, Shabbos Kestenbaum, a Harvard University graduate who has gone after the university in a lawsuit due to their response or lack thereof to the protests there at Harvard. So it's quite apparent based on the speakers list and the agenda here. While it won't be a complete focal point, certainly of the Republican platform over the next few days, they certainly feel they can make this divide a winning issue and are putting several speakers at the forefront of this particular topic up on the days here over the next few days.
And Mike, more broadly speaking, when you look at the convention, the sentiment on the ground right now following the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, of course, that triumphant photograph, the iconic moment when he held his fist up, a message of strength in that particular moment versus, of course, much concern within the Democratic Party about Joe Biden and his ability for the long haul, so to speak. Give us your sense of what the feeling is like there on the ground.
I think the Trump administration, I think their supporters here in Milwaukee feel like they can deliver a knockout blow if it already hasn't been done. Of course, those iconic images from the aftermath of the assassination attempt will be put on any advertisement that the Trump administration sends out. But I think it goes beyond that at this point. They feel like they have a winning message. They feel like they have the votes here. And this is a Trump campaign that, as difficult as it is for them, and especially for their leader, to kind of just pipe down a little bit and not make any unforced errors. I think we saw that discipline in the aftermath of that first presidential debate where it was a disaster for the Biden campaign by all accounts, and Trump just went off the radar for about a week. It was completely unexpected. He just disappeared off the kind of the public platforms that he usually uses to espouse his particular views at any given moment. So I think that the Trump campaign this time around, as opposed to the last two times, seems a bit more disciplined in its message, seems a little bit more on point. And if he can avoid making those unforced errors here down the home stretch, I think Trump and the campaign are more optimistic about their chances in letting the Biden administration continue to make those mistakes.
And Mike, of course, while you're in Wisconsin focusing on the Republican convention, any updates in terms of the internal pressure Joe Biden is facing right now to potentially move aside ahead of November? What are you hearing? What are your sources telling you?
Well, we had that initial wave last week after the NATO summit of some 20 Congress members coming out and saying it's time for Joe Biden to step aside, to let new leadership come in and do it post-haste, essentially. But we haven't really heard much at all since then. There's been a movement now within the Democratic Party to try to move up or at least get going the process of getting a nomination vote going internally internally ahead of the Democratic nomination, the Democratic convention, which will take place next month in Chicago, to try to head off any kind of effort to move Biden aside. So he obviously has the DNC infrastructure itself behind him, but the larger base, well, we've heard a number of donors who've said they're suspending their donations until Biden steps aside, or at least until he makes an argument, a coherent, cogent argument for why he should still be the leader of the ticket here. So there's still much to sort out, but it seems that initial wave has been, at least paused for the time being.
Thank you so much. Senior U.S. correspondent Mike Wagenheim, live from Milwaukee. And now, still in studio, our Middle East correspondent Ariel Oseran, and joining us now, correspondent Nicole Zedek. So, Nicole, I want to pick on specifically an item we were discussing now with Mike, and that is pitting two leaders and the images and the footage around them at this juncture. Israel is waiting for some kind of breakthrough that sees their hostages come home, including 8 American hostages. Right now, we know one of the families will be addressing the Republican convention. At the same time, Joe Biden has also vowed to keep working to get all the hostages home. How are the different parties, so to speak, responding to this urgent need to get some kind of deal?
I think it's interesting to note how the different parties themselves, the leadership from the party, that being both Trump and Biden in this case, they both proclaim to be Zionists. However, when you look at actually the parties themselves and the public, how they're responding to this, that's really where we're seeing many of these differences. Take a look at the RNC, where you're seeing Israel being talked about, even though it's not the main topic, it's being talked about, and it's being talked about in a positive light. Now, outside the RNC, when you're seeing some of these far left demonstrations, they're far left demonstrations, but they're not necessarily just against the Republican National Convention. The main topic that they're doing is also waving the Palestinian flag. They're calling for an end to the Israel-Hamas war. And so it's also a main topic being talked about in the Democratic Party. But on the flip side, we're seeing more and more of this vocal anti-Israel sentiment. So from the leadership, however, when we're hearing from both Biden and Trump, they both do claim that they have the full support backing Israel. However, how they both intend to do that, that's what's different. When we're hearing from this new VP candidate Vance and Trump, they're a little bit more hands-off. They want to let Israel take care of this, quote-unquote, get the job done, as we've heard Trump say in the past when it comes to the war in Israel, whereas Biden is taking more of a hands-on approach, trying to pressure Israel to get this deal to a close as fast as possible to wrap up the war and get this hostage negotiation deal to complete.
At the same time, Ariel, the elections for the United States are only in November, and far more imminent is a potential flare-up across the northern front, as we heard from our colleague Pierre Kloschentler just a short while ago. What is the understanding right now about the potential U.S. support if there were to be a full escalation between the IDF and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon?
Well, first we have to look at U.S. support to try and finalize the diplomatic solution, and that is in full force. The recent reporting indicates that there could be an agreement in the near future. At the end of the day, such an agreement would have to, as far as Israel is concerned, would have to force Hezbollah operatives to not only leave the border area, but basically to abide by UN Resolution 1701 from 2006, following the last wide-scale war between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah hasn't been adhering to that agreement for resolution, not even an agreement, for 18 years now. And so obviously the United States would want to see the diplomatic avenue prevail here. They're putting a lot of efforts, sending the special envoy Amos Hochstein to the region multiple times. So far, that hasn't brought any real breakthrough. I honestly don't think we'll see a breakthrough with Lebanon before we see one with Hamas, and that's also because Hezbollah chief Nasrallah is tying the two fronts together, saying that once there's a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah will abide by that and will cease the fire from their side. The question is, can Israel accept that reality? Is it enough for Israel that Hezbollah is simply choosing not to fire at it in terms of the security situation along the northern border? That can take some time until it erupts further, if it will. simply for the simple fact that that won't conflagrate more before the war or current operation in Gaza ends its current phase. So I think once we see significant movement regarding Gaza, then we should expect to see some more significant diplomatic movement, if at all, regarding the Northern Front.
Ariel, briefly, the IDF says too many tanks have been damaged in this war right now. That is a disturbing assessment. What does that mean for a potential escalation up north if there are so many tanks that aren't up to scratch, so to speak?
Tanks are just one example. I think if we're looking at this, the bomb shipment crisis between Jerusalem and Washington, that is one of the key reasons, because Israel is setting its sights on a potential wider war in the north. It will need a lot more armaments, a lot more armored vehicles. Many of them, whether they're tanks or just armored personnel vehicles, have been damaged by Hamas terrorists. It doesn't necessarily mean that the soldiers who were inside were indeed hurt, but Hamas has put set a goal to itself to try and incapacitate as many of these armored vehicles as they can through RPG and other weapons. And so this is Hamas is presenting this as a success. As far as the IDF is concerned, it's an obstacle, but not something that can't be met with time, as well as additional funding and perhaps even further American military support.
And talking about further military support from the US, Nicole, Benjamin Netanyahu is set to address Congress. We started the show with that message from the families of the 5 young soldiers still in captivity saying, sign a deal before you go. What is expected when he gets to Washington?
It's certainly going to be a lot on his plate and a lot to do, especially since this is his first trip to Washington, to the White House, I want to say, invited by Biden since he became prime minister again in 2022. So this is a big deal. He has a lot to talk about on this trip and really honing in, I think, on his successes and trying to split the difference that the White House has made and the bickering between both Biden and Netanyahu. I think he's really going to try and push past that and talk about the victories he's had.
Correspondent Nicole Zedek, Middle East correspondent Ariel Osaran, appreciate you being here in studio. Thank you for those updates on all the latest developments. And now, an update on a highly contentious draft exemption issue here in Israel. The IDF confirming it will start sending out recruitment orders for young religious men as soon as Sunday. Overnight, a group of ultra-Orthodox Israelis harassing 2 senior IDF officers in the religious city of Bnei Brak. The incident is being condemned by both the right and the left, but it shines a light on the highly divisive move to include yeshiva students who had previously been exempt from serving. Our Nicole Zedek has more in this report.
Dozens of ultra-Orthodox Jews shouting and throwing objects at 2 senior IDF officers in the religious city of Bnei Brak for a hot topic meeting, the establishment of a Haredi brigade in the army.
The recruitment orders are on their way. They'll be issued during the next few weeks. So I think this is a dramatic change and should be congratulated because it will increase security and unity. These 2 things are important.
The IDF confirmed Tuesday it will start sending out initial draft orders to ultra-Orthodox yeshiva students on Sunday. Their announcement came after a petition was filed by the Movement for Quality Government in Israel, which demanded the High Court order the government and IDF immediately draft 63,000 yeshiva students who had been exempt from service, accusing the IDF of ignoring the court's rulings. The Knesset Foreign Affairs and Defense Committee chairman said he'll start working on a draft bill on Wednesday, and anyone opposed is welcome to join the discussion.
There is only one place where a conscription law is drafted, and that is in the Foreign Affairs and Security Committee. They start working on the wording of the sections on Wednesday. Everyone is invited, from citizens to the Prime Minister.
The mob attack on officers has been condemned by both the opposition and coalition, with Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich chiming in.
The attack by the extremists in Bnei Brak on the IDF officers is a dangerous incident of violence and coercion that does not represent even a fraction of the ultra-Orthodox public. It is important to continue efforts to establish new frameworks adapted to the lifestyle of the ultra-Orthodox public and to increase the participation of the IDF and the civil service.
But the finance ministry also warned Tuesday of possible damages to the economy, citing a new report that found if ultra-Orthodox men are drafted, it could hurt efforts to integrate this population into the workforce. So many details still need to be ironed out if this section of the religious population is to join the army in the near future.
And a quick update on this very story. 9 people have been arrested during demonstrations on this very issue in the city of Bnei Brak just a short while ago. Now, giant moves by Google, a signal to global investors that the Israeli high-tech industry is still on the map. It's acquiring an Israeli cyber company called Wiz for an unprecedented amount. Correspondent Adi Cohen takes a deeper look at what this means for the Israeli tech industry.
Advanced talks regarding the largest deal in the history of Israeli high tech has shaken the industry this week during one of its greatest periods of crisis. Earlier this week, a report in the Wall Street Journal revealed a massive deal currently on the table of Alphabet, the parent company of global Google, for the acquisition of the Israeli cyber company Wiz for the astronomical sum of $23 billion.
It's a very popular field. Israel's considered a superpower in the cyber field, with a truly impressive history of successful cyber companies that have become world leaders. There is also the fact that Wiz specializes in cloud-based cybersecurity.
The cyber company Wiz was established less than 5 years ago by 4 friends, alumni of the IDF Military Intelligence Unit 8200, CEO Asaf Rappaport and Vice Presidents Roy Razniko, Ami Lutvak, and Yinon Kostika. It provides an information security platform for the cloud and has raised approximately $900 million to date, with a valuation of $10 billion. Undoubtedly, if the deal is completed, it will significantly enrich the founders. But the good news is not only for them.
I think it is also a signal to the global technology industry that even during a time of war, business is still done in Israel, companies are bought, and deals are sealed.
This deal is indeed an expression of confidence in the Israeli high-tech industry. It should be noted that Wiz, formerly, is a company registered in the United States, an American company. Most of its employees work outside of Israel, but nonetheless, it's a company whose founders and management are Israeli, with its main development center located in Israel.
This expression of confidence comes during one of the toughest crises the industry has known. According to the latest data from the Israel Innovation Authority, in 2023, Israeli technology companies raised about $8 billion, a decrease of approximately 55% compared to the capital raised in 2022.
I think part of the concern in recent months is the fear of a brain drain. This is a situation where both Israeli scientists and Israeli companies are leaving the country due to the risk Israel's under, and this should certainly worry us looking forward.
The high-tech crisis began long before the Gaza war and was also affected by inflation and rising interest rates, as well as the judicial overhaul promoted by the government before October 7th and the ensuing protests. Wiz founders, Rappaport and Kostika, were among the prominent voices against the reform and even chose to move some of their funds overseas.
Basically, the startup nation cannot thrive without a strong democracy.
Nevertheless, despite the deepening crisis in the Israeli economy due to the high costs of the Gaza war, the potential Wiz-Google deal holds significant importance.
At the current time, such a deal could yield revenues for the state budget that could reach the magnitude of 8 to 10 billion shekels, essentially from the capital gains tax of the owners.
In any case, even amid the crisis, the giant deal serves as another signal to the government about the importance of the high-tech sector as a locomotive for the Israeli economy, which constitutes almost 1/5 of Israel's national product.
A Holocaust survivor believed he didn't have any more family, but the results of a DNA test have changed everything for Shalom Korai. More in this report.
A miraculous meeting for 83-year-old Holocaust survivor Shalom Korai. After living all his life without knowing his real name and age, and without having any family, Shalom walked into the arms of second cousin Anne Medine Hellman at a South Carolina airport.
He's giving us the satisfaction of knowing that he has a family that he never knew existed and has been wanting for 83 years, and he's coming down the jetway, I think.
All this was made possible by the magic of genetic science. Psychologist Daniel Horowitz has been studying orphan children in the Holocaust. Through DNA testing, they matched on MyHeritage and found out Korai's grandfather was actually the brother of Anne Hellman's grandfather.
When I approached Shalom, he revealed that he knew anything about his family. He was an orphan. He never met, not the parents, any kind of other member of his family. He was alone in this world.
Korai, who speaks mostly Hebrew, couldn't stop smiling, even if he didn't completely understand all the commotion that was going on around him. He and Anne spoke often since the DNA breakthrough, first in letters and later on video calls several times a week.
He called me and he said, with the DNA, they found a family from him in Charleston. And I almost had the tears in my eyes when I heard the story. He was very excited. He didn't know at the beginning how to digest it. And it's slowly dawning on him. We had a lot of conversation about it. And he's getting used little by little to have a brand new family, which he never knew about before.
I felt like I've given somebody a new life. I was going to say, he became my child. You know, I have to protect him and take care of him.
A brand new family. And that is a wrap for The Rundown. I'm Benita Levine. Kalev Ben David is back tomorrow, so make sure to catch The Rundown. Thank you for watching.